All right, this video is going to talk about adjustment layers, another very important and powerful aspect of Photoshop. So since we have all of we have our layer palette open, down at the bottom is I find the easiest way to get to the adjustment layers right here. It's this sort of, I always refer to it as that half and half cookie, you know, the cookie that's sort of got the white frosting on half and the chocolate frosting on the other. But anyway, these are all the adjustment layers. You can also get to them through the actual adjustment layers tab. I just haven't memorized all of these symbols, so I don't use it this way. I always use it directly because it's nice once you choose one, you get to the properties, but it drops it right in and you can start using it. But anyway, real quickly, just go through. So we have solid color. Solid color just adds a solid color layer to the composition or whatever you're working on. Gradient adds a gradient, so you can add a gradient directly through this. Now I usually create a layer and then the gradient just because it gives me a little bit more freedom to place the gradient, but you can do it directly this way. Pattern, you can add a pattern, right? So there's multiple patterns and you can scale that pattern up, right? And this can have some very interesting things, especially if you pair this with like multiply or screen. You can do some really crazy stuff with patterns. Okay, next we have brightness and contrast. I don't advise using this a whole lot just because it's so one-dimensional. And you don't have a great amount of control in the tones. It's very easy to blow something out or go over. It's also just as easy to go under and make something too dark. All right, but it's there, people. You could try the auto and let the computer decide what it should. Oh, I may have frozen my computer. Nope, there we go. You know, and this is what the computer thinks it should be, but it's looking at all the tones. And the sky is still pretty bright, so maybe that's not the best for us. Anyway, that's brightness and contrast. Levels. Levels is very important. We'll come back to this one, but this one is similar. It's really just talking about controlling exposure. Levels is great. Equally great is curves. Curves is levels just allowing you to use this linear curve line to express the changes. All right, so curves can be very important. Under there we have exposure. And sometimes this is very useful, especially I use it a lot when I create shadows of things, when I have to like create a fake shadow. But again, this is one of those tools that, it's not useful in most situations, but it can be useful in some situations. I tend not to use it a lot, however. All right, next we have vibrance, and that's just the ability to change the vibrance and saturation, just like you can in Camera Raw, but you can do it post once you've opened it up in Photoshop. I don't use that very much at all. I do, however, use hue saturation. This is just a brilliant, brilliant adjustment layer. So many things you can do in here. We'll come back to this one, but basically this is controlling color and saturation of color throughout here. It also controls hue, which can get really, really interesting. So we'll come back to that one because that one's just got so much to it. We have color balance. Color balance is similar in the sense that it uses color, or it focuses on color, but in here you can select to work in the shadows, midtones, or highlights, and you can balance out colors. So this is going to apply to the whole image, though. And so, again, this is a useful tool in some instances, but not the best tool in many instances. All right, so that's color balance. Underneath there we have black and white, pretty simple. What's nice about this black and white is you can still adjust, if you can see, you can still adjust here to the grade or the grays, the individual colors, and that really comes in handy to make a really striking yeah, like here I can bring those blues down to make a real striking black and white photo. Okay, so that's black and white. Next up, we have photo filter. And so this is where you can add what used to be a practical filter that would go in front of the lens to either cool the image down or warm it up, right? And again, it applies to everything, but basically it is providing, you know, a certain color. Sepia is pretty popular, so you can kind of give that sepia look to a photo. So that's about photo filters. It's about what they do. Channel mixer. All right, this is where this gets into a little bit more difficult discussion, and not really part of the boot camp, but this is where you can start changing the individual channels of color. And we're not going to really use that much at the beginning as beginning Photoshoppers. Okay, color lookup. Right, this is where you can use a lookup table or a LUT, and this is where you can apply a specific look. And so, you know, if you were from the days of Yonder when they used actual film stock often had a particular look to it depending on what stock you used. And so you can apply these lookup tables or LUTs to the image, and it'll simulate the that particular stock, right? And these can produce some fantastic looks, but it is you giving up a little bit of control for the sake of ease to get at a specific type of look. All right, next up we have invert, and that's pretty simple, right? It just inverts the image. We have posterize. Now posterize basically means that it's breaking all the millions of colors that it could be down to the number of steps you indicate. And so like if you can see here, if I indicate 9 levels, we're dealing with 9 levels of color here, right? And if I go down even further to 2 layers, 2 levels of color, right, we're dealing with basically 2 sort of groupings. Now there's more than 2 colors, of course, but the idea is that everything is shot down into this sort of, well, just very simple layered look. This can come in handy for a lot of stylized images. All right, we have threshold, right, and this is basically just what's the threshold you want. This is really good to create silhouettes or like drawings, but you have to find that right balance. So I don't use this a whole lot, but it can be useful for some stylized work. All right, we have gradient mapping. And so since we have it on, we'll put it on a colored gradient, and so you can see what that sort of does. It's a very interesting look, and again, for style, you know, if you have a very unique vision, I think this can come in handy. And then selective color, right? And this is where we can focus in on specific, let's focus in on the greens, maybe actually the yellows. And so we can start impacting those particular colors, right? So you can see right in here, let me zoom in. Right in here, it's basically adding magenta to the yellows, or it's adding cyan to the yellows, or subtracting, adding black, or taking it away to make it brighter, you know, and then adding the yellow, right? So selective color works in CMYK instead of RGB. And you can save different looks if you'd like. So this can be handy to again create an interesting look. Not something I use a whole lot of. So to recap, right here, this little cookie looking icon is how you get to the adjustment layers. The ones that I think you'll probably end up using the most in photography is going to be levels, curves, hue saturation, black and white, maybe photo filter. The other ones are fun, maybe solid color too for some looks, but the other ones involve a lot more manipulation and a lot more stylized look than just normal photography. All right, next up we're going to take a deeper dive into levels.